Here we are again, folks. Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. We are in 2 Timothy, and there is a mountain, a small mountain, but a mountain that would take it straight up and straight down. It would take a lot of work to go up and down it. It is slap full, and a half hour is not enough time to give you what 2 Timothy is all about and what it has to say. You need to study it for yourself. There's 84 verses. 84 verses. If you just gave 1 minute to each verse, you'd be 84 minutes. And even given 1 minute to each verse, you couldn't clarify half of what each verse says. Each verse is nearly a book in itself. If you would take and break that verse down and discover what that verse says, you would be 8 hours and 40 minutes just doing that. And or 84 hours, and he gives the outline for a preacher, the pattern, the pulpit, the person, and the person. Paul is the preacher here in chapter 1. And he said, "Whereunto I am appointed." Now he's not just a preacher; he is the appointed preacher to write this book by God, and he is an apostle. After the order of Jesus Christ, he was knocked off his mule and he saw Jesus. He also was a teacher, and he was a teacher not just of Jews but of Gentiles. He was a teacher of Gentiles, 1 and 11. He was not just a preacher, but he was a student, and he had students under him, and one of them was Timothy. Now Paul took 3 years under Gamaliel, and he had to try to teach these younger fellows what Gamaliel taught him in a 3-year period, in a short period of time, and he didn't have a school set up like he was in when he was under Gamaliel. Now his concern for Timothy is as he prayed for him daily, constantly, chapter 1 and verse 3, and that he knew his tears, chapter 1 and verse 4. He knew that Timothy was a fellow that was able to weep over his people and over his job. Now Paul's given him, in this little book of 84 verses, he's given him a monumental task. And even if he gave it to him in the spring, he wants him to be in Rome and bring his cloak and his parchment before winter, if possible. And so he's given Timothy this great task. Timothy's not going to have time. He's not going to have time to play. He's not going to have time to sit around. He's not going to have time to cry about what Paul said to do, and I don't know if I can get it done. He went about doing it, and he went about trying to get it done. And we see that Paul had great confidence in Timothy. That his counseled Timothy, stir up the gift. Now he knew that Timothy had a gift in him that his mother Eunice and his grandmother Lois had put in him. He said, "Don't be ashamed of Christ, the message or messenger," chapter 1 and 8. He said, "Hold fast." He said, "Hold fast now to that sound doctrine you were raised in. Remain thou in your ministry." Now, whatever ministry God gives you, if God gives you a ministry, I have somewhat of a problem jumping from ministry to ministry to ministry to ministry. And I had children's church for about 7 years. I was in that ministry. Then I was in a Sunday school class for about 3 years. Then I was in another ministry of the church for 2 or 3 years. Then I was back in a Sunday school class by my choice. For a few years I took on the 5th and 6th grade boys. And I was very interested in this day and age of keeping them out of the things of the world, like Paul was doing with Timothy right here. Now, the preacher and himself, he reviews his past performance and his ministering as an apostle, which also every apostle was called to be a servant. And this is in 1 and 1 through 1 and 3. Now, he was a prisoner. And while he was a prisoner of Jesus Christ, he was a teacher, 1 and 11. And he was a father, chapter 1 and 2. And while he was a father, he suffered, chapter 1 and 12. And a preacher, 1 and 11. And so he suffered as a preacher. And then we see some other things here. He retains his permanent hope. We need to retain that hope we were given the day of salvation. The very day of salvation. Retain, therefore I know whom I have believed. And I'm persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. When I committed to myself, 3 o'clock in the morning, November 5th, 1972, Jesus Christ has kept me, even though I have made many mistakes. Even though I've had many failures. He has not cast me out. He has not put sin back on me that he forgave me for. It's still forgiven. What happens when I have new sin? I say, Lord, forgive me. Immediately, when I realize it, or he shows it to me. And he throws that into the sea of forgetfulness. I don't have to go to the altar every day, every Sunday, and confess that same sin. It's gone. I had to confess a new one if I got a new one to confess. I tried to stay from having a new one, but we do have those. Here's 2 vows that are possible. And the reference is to his salvation, which Paul had deposited with Christ. Now, Paul had won Timothy to the working part of salvation. I'm sure that Timothy's mama, Lois and Eunice, his grandmother, had won Timothy to the Lord, but Paul won him to the side of the Lord that says, now I have a salvation I can walk in, and I'm free from that law. I'm sure that Eunice and Lois taught him the legal side of Christianity. And Paul taught him the salvation side, a possible reference to his service which Christ had deposited with Paul. He regrets the action of some false friends. Now, there were some friends that had actions that were false, and they were false. They proved themselves to run along and act like they were something that they weren't, and they weren't saved, and they were getting 3 meals a day, and they were getting treated pretty good, and when it came down to putting the pavement, their feet on the pavement, putting it to the road, they couldn't do it. So, and he rejoices concerning the action of a true friend. He didn't like the action of the false friend, but he rejoiced in the true friends. 1:16 through 18. Now, Paul, the pattern in chapter 2, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. 1 and 2. Now, Paul's saying, I was beaten, I was chained, I was tied, I was carried, I was this, I was that. I've been in the deep, I've done everything. I have followed the best I can do. Now, you teach that to other men. Use me as an example if you need to here, and do it. And Paul the prophet, chapter 3. This know also, that in the last days peerless times shall come. 3 and 1. Now, for every man there is some last days. I'm in my last days. I'm 76 years old, and I'm in my last days. Is this the last days of the time, Peter? For me it is. I have a wife laying in there right now with terminal cancer. She's headed out of here, and it's getting quicker every day. And she has terminal cancer. Her days are numbered. My days are numbered. Yeah, I don't have terminal cancer laying in there. I'm sitting right here, but my days are numbered. When God gets ready for me, boom. I'll either have a heart attack or I'll do as her. I'll have so many days of suffering and dying slowly. And so this is how it's going to work. It's going to work the way God has it work, and we have to accept it. And so here we are. Paul the prisoner, chapter 4. The time of my departure is at hand. 4 and 6. Paul knew and realized the day of his departure was at hand. Why? Because he'd been told by that wicked man, I'm fixed to kill you, man. I am fixed to kill you. I've set the date. And Paul knew it. See, I have finished my course. He said, Paul said, I kept the faith and I finished my course. I pray God will allow me to keep the faith and finish the course that he has set me on with what he wants me to do. Whatever that is right now, I do not know. I'm torn between a rock and a hard place. And that's a hard place to be, because rocks are hard and a hard place is hard. I'm in the valley of decision. I'm in the green pasture, if you please. And I know that God is going to take me through that pasture, through the creeks and the rocks and the valleys below, and he's going to bring me up into another green pasture on another mountain on the other side one day. Well, what does he have for you? I have no idea what God has for me. None whatsoever. But when my wife goes to heaven, then I'll have to start digging out. Lord, what do you want me to do? I've got all kinds of desires. God has had me build a humongous house here that is going to be vacant. It's going to be absent from the spiritual side. A big spiritual side of this house is going to be absent on. This house is nothing but a building without the spirit of this woman that I have in it. To me, it's nothing without her. I mean, it's a building, it's a house. It's not going to be a place of contentment for me unless I use it for God's kingdom. Or what can I do with it? I can make it a children's home. What else could I do with it? I could make it a home for derelicts. I could make it a home for those that are poverty-stricken, those that are sleeping under bridges, those that are out there. I could make it a home for them. I could make it a home for a lot of different things. I could make it home for a school. That people come and they stay here at it, and they learn here at it. And it would comfortably, I could comfortably use 16 people, we'll say, here. They could live comfortably here. 16 people could live in this house very comfortably. Cooking, eating, sleeping in bedrooms, having heat, having lights, having everything they need, and having a library. I have a nice library, probably have 1,000 books. I probably have 3,000, 4,000 teaching tapes from different colleges and different preachers and different places. I started in Tennessee Temple in 1972, 73, and I went from Tennessee Temple. I've been familiar with those in Bob Jones University and those in Jerry Fowles ministry in Lynchburg, Virginia. I've been familiar with many people I studied behind. Just this week I was reading a book, and I was reading the name Warren Wiersbe. I'm familiar with him. I'm familiar with J. Vernon McGee and Brother Lester Roloff, and I've had many preachers I've met. Can I say that I was personally a friend of them? In the spiritual sense, yes, because they were above me spiritually, and I accepted them wholly. And when I studied their work, I studied like they were God telling me, this is it. What they're saying now is for today. I spoke in another excerpt even today about starting a bus ministry when I was young. And I'm not too old to start a bus ministry. I'm not too old to do work. At the church I'm at, if I had the cash money, now that's something else I could do. I could get this house 100% and sell it and probably take $60,000 to $70,000 down there and put it toward the camp. That would build the first campsite, the first building. $70,000, if we went right and treated it right and did the work, I could build that first campsite. I have a vision down there. We have 200 acres, and it's paid for. And I have a vision of a 40 or 50 acre camp in there, working 24 hours a day with people, with those less fortunate than you and I that have fallen off the planet in a sense. And they're living under bridges, and they're living in places where they have nowhere to go. and to go out and give them some hope and bring them in. Let them go out there with a hoe, a rake, with a hatchet, and work on that land and clear land and move stuff and make it pretty and be designated an area. This is your area. You got 50 feet by 50 feet right here. You can work as many days as you want on it. You can make it as pretty a place as you want. You can clean all the alders out of it, clean all the trash, and make it where you can mow it even. Clean the branches out of the lower branches out of the trees. You can do here what you would like to do. Something to do every day, as well as study. Eat 3 meals a day and be comfortable right here. We got the place. We just don't have the finances. That's the only problem. We don't have the finances. I'd be willing to take every cent that I got from this house and put a camper over there and live in the camper and get that going. I'd be willing to do that and that may come about. That just may come about. I've already got the camper. Matter of fact, I got 2, so I can put one this way and I can back the other one up to it and turn it into a bathroom, a large bathroom house, and make it nice so that I would have a full-size house with a kitchen and a bedroom, a closet, and a nice-sized bathroom. I've already got that figured out. I've already got the place picked out. I haven't gone to authorities with it yet, but I'm looking for God to come on the scene and make this all be realistic. Whatever it is that He's going to have for me, I want it to be realistic. This is what Paul's telling Timothy. He says, my pattern, Timothy, has been roaming from place to place to place to place. I spent 3 years with Gamaliel in Rome, but now I've been on the road all this time, and I've not been allowed to settle down and to do a work. But you can be a preacher. You can do a work. But what Paul did do is he left Timothy in authority, and he gave him authority that he could go from church to church, and they would accept him as an authority because he had earned the right to do that. So I have no idea what God has for me. We all must do what we can do in God while we can do it, and let Him lead us and guide us. Paul the preacher, chapter 1. Whereunto I am appointed a preacher, and an apostle, and a teacher of the Gentiles. I am appointed by God a preacher. I got my license in 1973 to preach the gospel. I got my other license, my other credentials. I got a certificate of a couple years in a college, and then I got another certificate that says that, what does it say? It says that I've mastered I actually put one of them backwards robes on with one of them big red things on it, and graduated. And it says that I know the Bible, and that I've learned it, and that I've earned that. And that's a great thing, and I was glad for it. But I don't let that go to my head, because I'm a dyslexic speller with an 8th grade education. And then with this great honor bestowed on me of having this, first I was an associate in the gospel, and then I became whatever it is you get when you get the last part of it. But that shouldn't puff us up, because if it does, we're going to be in trouble, because just about the time you think you're smart, you're going to find out how stupid you really are and how dumb you really are. So don't let the education go to your head. If you're smart enough to have a good education, be careful. You don't flaunt it. Don't flaunt it. Don't put other people down because you have a higher education. Paul prayed day and night. He longed to see him. He was aware of his tears. He had full confidence in him. He exhorted him to stir up the gift. He is not to be ashamed of the message of Christ. He is not to be ashamed of the message of Christ. He's to hold fast a sound doctrine. He is to remain true to his ministry. He is to preach, the preacher and himself. He is to review his past performance to the apostles and give a sevenfold description of himself in this chapter. He is an apostle. He is a father. He is a faithful servant. He is a prisoner. He's a preacher. He's a teacher. He's a sufferer. He retains his permanent hope. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. What day? That's the day that he enters heaven. When you lay this body down, if you're saved, you enter heaven immediately. There's no such a thing as soul sleep. There wasn't in the Old Testament soul sleep. There was a place called paradise, and a saved person went to paradise. In Matthew chapter 19, there was a rich man who fed sumptuously every day, had a beggar named Lazarus that laid at his gate full of sores. Lazarus was a Christian. Lazarus was saved. In the Old Testament, he was headed for paradise. The rich man was headed for hell, and Lazarus preached to him and said, "Sir, you need to listen to me. God set me out here with this place that I'm setting. I sat here daily just to give you the message." And the rich man wouldn't even give him the crumbs that fell from his table. He threw the crumbs over him and cursed him and said, "Get out of my gate, you old nut. I don't want you around here." I can see him going by him in the morning, give him a kick, say, "Get out of here. I don't want you around here." And Lazarus says, "Sir, if you would ask Jesus to forgive you of your sins, come in your heart and save your soul, you would go to heaven and be there forever." Which in that day it was paradise. But the Bible said the rich man died, and in hell he lifted up his eyes. Lazarus also died. And he could see from hell into paradise. And he saw Lazarus. And he saw God. For the first time, he could see God. And he said, "Father." Now he calls him Father. It's too late, but all of the people in hell now are calling God Father. But he's not the father of them. Their father's the devil. And God has to say to them, "No, you chose that place. Your father's the devil. You will burn and squirm in fire forever with all the desires of the world." How do we know that? He desired a drop of water on his tongue. He didn't say, "Bring me a drink." He said, let him dip his finger in a drop of water and cool my tongue, for I am in torment. Do you know that's how close heaven and hell are? They are so close that they're neighbors. And this is it's a picture of the yin and yang, the black and white thing from China, or Japan, wherever it's from China, I think, that it's got that zigzag in the middle, and that's how close they are. And he said, let him dip his finger and reach down through from where he is in paradise and put a drop of water on my tongue and cool my tongue. And God said to him, "Remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest good things, and Lazarus likewise received evil things. Now he is receiving good things, and you are receiving evil things." That's a picture of today and the world we live in today. Those wealthy folks that would look down on a little peon like me, or look down on a preacher that's a preacher, and they're ahead of a great company, or they're ahead of something. I got news for you. This is a temporary world. This is a temporary world. This is not your abode forever. This is temporary. No matter how high on the totem pole you are, no matter if you're looking out the 150th story of the biggest building in the biggest city in the United States, and you got the highest office and pay the most money, and you own the whole penthouse on top of it, if you don't know Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're going to die and go to hell. And that's what Paul is telling Timothy to keep in mind. To tell everybody. And he's given him a short window. He's gave him a summer. And maybe a little bit in the fall. But before winter, be here with my cloak and my parchments. And my parchments for sure. Because I need to finish up my work before I be put to death. And there's a good chance that the parchments, that this letter that he wrote Timothy was on some parchments that he had that he was going to have to get Timothy to deliver to somebody else. And so, anyway, we saw that rich man. He said he was in torments. But God told him there was a great gulf fixed between him and heaven, between him and paradise. Do you know who crossed that gulf? God said that nobody could cross it. It was a great gulf nobody could cross. Lazarus couldn't cross it if he wanted to. But Jesus crossed it. Jesus crossed it with the cross. When he hung on the cross, he crossed that gulf so that you and I can, all we have to do is say, "Forgive me, Lord, of my sin," and come in my heart and save my soul, and he'll do it. And that's what we need to do. We need to say that, and we need to do that. And we have the opportunity to tell others around us the same thing. Will they want to hear it? Some do not, but some do. Will some hear it? All you got to have is one. If you lived your whole life, if I lived my whole 76 years and won one person to the Lord, it would be worth have been here for that reason. Hey, hell's forever, and hell's fire. And the worm dieth not. That means the soul of man is going to be like a worm squirming in that fire and can't die. And you're going to have all your memory. The rich man knew Lazarus, and he could see him in his heavenly place. Can you imagine seeing out of hell fire and seeing that man that you cursed and swore about and threatened him, that little Christian guy, and he's doing well, and he's in a heavenly place. The minute this soul leaves this body, I'm going to be with Jesus. I'm going to be in heaven. And then one day, a great rapture is going to take place. And those that are alive that are in Christ on the earth are going to be taken up. And all those bodies, and my body will be included, and my wife's body will be included, my mother and father's body will be included. And all the bodies that have been in the grave since the cross will come out of the grave and join back up in heaven. And the Bible said we're going to look in heaven just like we look down here. We're going to know each other. John is going to know the other 11 disciples, 10 disciples. All of the disciples, they're going to know each other. They're going to have positions in heaven. They're going to be around the table. There's going to be 24 elders. There's going to be those from the 12 tribes of Israel. They're going to be around a table. Those head men are going to be around that table. They're going to be having a feast. And they're going to be having a constant feast. A never-ending talk and fellowship. And it's going to be a place of blessing, not a place of cursing. The other place of cursing is going to be there. And for 1,000 years, the devil's going to be cast into a bottomless pit. I believe, and I really believe, and I get a picture of it this way, that there's a black hole in the sky that they can't penetrate. The human man has never been able to penetrate it, and he sure don't want to get close enough to it to get in it, because there's no way out, and it's an endless hole. And nobody knows where it goes or where it ends, or they know where it starts. But it could end, it could never end. It may never end. And God's going to cast the devil into this place for 1,000 years. And for that 1,000 years, the devil's not going to be here to trouble us like he has now. And there will be a remnant out of that 1,000 years that will, when the devil gets released at the end of that 1,000 years, and he's going to do the same thing. He's going to beguile another group as he did beguiled Eve. And they're going to be beguiled, and the false angels are going to take their souls and take them to be in that place called hell. And they will be destroyed forever and ever, and their tears will be wiped away then. All tears will be wiped away. And you and I won't have in heaven, we won't have the memory of losing the loved ones and losing those that we've lost on this earth, or those that have gone and died and went to hell. But we will be clean and fresh. And then God's going to take this earth and he's going to throw it into a lake of fire to turn and burn forever. And he's going to give us, he's going to build a new heaven and a new earth. And we're going to dwell on that. And we're going to be there. You say, Brother Peter, that sounds like a whole lot of fantasy to me. You better believe it. You better believe it. This book, the Bible, is the absolute truth. And you better believe it. My daughter said something the other day about them saying we came from monkey. Well, I got news for you. DNA has proved that we did not come from monkey. That we are individuals, and everybody's DNA is individual, and there never was any way that anything could have evolved from one thing to another. Because all DNA in animals is separate, and DNA in people is separate. And there's no chance in a billion years that DNA lies. It don't lie. It's correct. It's absolutely correct. And they can go back in the DNA of me and find my ancestors. And they weren't monkeys. How about that? They were human beings. You talk about the Andaluvian man. That was a man just like me. He just lived in a different age. He had to be strong. Yes, he probably carried a club. He didn't have a gun. And carrying that club made him have a big muscle and big strong legs, and could stand the cold and stand the heat and could stand the weather and could stand living in harsh environment. Yeah, he had to, because that's what he had, that's what he was, that's where he was. You take a man that works in a coal mine most of his life, and physically he's sound because he's dying from within inside, breathing that coal dust in his lungs. That's what my daddy died with. He died with coal dust in his lungs from firing boilers in the state of Maine. We didn't have a coal mine in Maine, but they sent coal up there, and he fired boilers. He shoveled coal every day for several years in the 40s, in the early 50s. Firing boilers, and the coal dust killed him. When he was 84, the doctors found it and said, "Hey, have you ever worked in a coal mine? Your lungs are full of coal dust, and we can't save you. We can't keep your heart pumping because of it." So, well, here we are, back at the end of another one. And don't be self-lovers. That's what people are today. Don't be money lovers. Don't be boasted, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, profane, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, with self-control, no self-control, with fierce savage, despisers of good things, traitors, betrayers, heady, reckless, high-minded, drunk, proud, pleasures of love, having religion without a form of religion, without having the real thing, having no God in your life, but following something that's supposed to be godly, but it takes you to the opposite direction, holding information without illumination, that's not being able, what you have is not real, learning and ever learning, yet not knowing the truth because you're studying the wrong things, seducers, and sorcerers, deceiving and being deceived. And that's what he said is going to be in the final days. And we're in those days now. We can see that in the United States of America. Well, my time has come and gone. We've got ourselves up here to 35 minutes, and we're not supposed to. We'll see you next time. Brother Peter saying bye-bye.